Do what you're best at until it pays you. Then when it pays you, then take that money and go do what you love.
We don't rise to the level of our dreams, we fall to the level of our systems, right? You can have these big, huge dreams and they might just be half built if you never create the systems.
I believe there's 5 phases of business: startup, perseverance, viability, scale, succession.
Today's guest has sold over 103 companies. 86 of them he exited in 1 year, producing an exit of 1.27 billion. Yes, billion, 1.27 billion. In this podcast, we get to talk through what it takes to create something like that, the mindset, and then everything else behind it. This podcast was filled with gold nuggets. And if you want to be an entrepreneur and if you're interested in business, you have to listen to this. Without further ado, please help me welcome Eddie Wilson to the podcast. Eddie, today you've exited 103 companies, something most people couldn't even dream about. But I have a question just for our listeners. What do you think when you're starting a company? What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when starting a company?
Biggest mistake they make is they don't plan for the exit. I believe there's 5 phases of business: startup, perseverance, viability, scale, succession. Most people think about hitting profit. They think about, producing income. They think about serving a customer, but most of them forget about, what am I going to do when I hit the ceiling of this business? When you plan for the exit in the beginning, it helps you build the company correctly.
Yeah. And what do you think, what are the key things to plan for in that exit? What are the biggest things you're planning for?
Biggest thing is you have to plan the timing of it. You have to have an intentional timing for when you potentially will exit, because the way you run your finances that last 12 months before you exit determines how much money you're going to make in the exit. But there's really 3 things I always say in the exiting of a company you got to be aware of. Number 1, you have to be aware of your revenue, right? And so most companies sell on EBITDA, and some sell on top line revenue, but for the most part, it's EBITDA, a multiple of EBITDA. So you got to be aware of your revenue, your bottom line revenue, your net profit, so on and so forth. Number 2, you have to be aware of what technology or IP you have, right? So what makes you uniquely you? It's why, Kevin O'Leary on Shark Tank always says, why would I pay you $1 million for your product when I could go build it myself for $500,000, right? You've got to be able to do something different than anyone else. That could be how you process your data. It could be your technology. It could be your products, whatever it is. You have to have your own, proprietary things inside of that business. That'll give you another multiplier. And then lastly, an operating system. So most businesses, when they're sold one of 2 ways. They're either sold in distress, which is how I buy them, or they're sold for the potential. If you're going to sell a business on its potential, you need to hand over the manual on how to run the business and how that next purchase for that, for the buyer is going to still have meat on the bone and still have an opportunity. When I'm selling to private equity firms. I hand them the manual, say this is how it's done. That's called the Empire Operating System, my operating system. Hand over as a systemized business. Then they know the gaps and the opportunities that they have to go increase that business, to go get more revenue out of it.
Yeah, I know as an entrepreneur myself who's really worked on it. This year, we're heading into our 5th year in our development construction business. And one of the key things we had to do to be able to scale was build that system. And it is difficult. Like when you have an entrepreneurial mind, to try to get out what's in your mind into a system that works, right? It's a difficult task. It feels like pulling teeth. It's just this crazy thing. But I was just reflecting yesterday actually on the fact that now the way that this system is working, it's far from perfect, but the way that it's working and what we're able to do now, I now feel very comfortable and confident that we can add as many projects as we need, because I feel good about the system. And now it's just finding the projects, the leads, and then finding the right people to execute on the system. But that system, it did take 4 years to build, right? To get what was in my head out into a system. I know you created a proprietary system that allows you to manage and operate all of the businesses that you're involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called the Empire Operating System. When I had the largest amount of companies at one time, I had 86 companies. The way that I went from 30 to 86 was building that Empire Operating System. It's a proprietary way that we manage the companies. It's creating the right systems and processes. Yep. It's understanding what measurables to focus on. It's about having the right meeting cadences. It's about, focusing on the right KPIs. It's about creating the right language within the business. But in the end, it's like, that's how I've scaled and exited every business I have. Now it's a rinse and repeat process. So once I had the 30, I was stuck. I had ceilinged out. I couldn't find any more time. I didn't know how to do it. I built a system that overlaid on all of them. Then I went to 86 in the next few years, had the $1 billion exit, and then turned around, and now I'm still buying companies all the time. The first thing we do when I buy a company, though, is I overlay that system. Because the faster I get that system in place, you're 100% right, then you can add the people, you can add the leads, you can add the cash, whatever it is, the capital that's needed, you add that on top of that system, and now you can pour gas on the fire and scale, And so until you have that system, you're always stuck and you're bound to the business, and that business is determined, its success is determined by, how much you're in that business.
Yeah. One of the things you hear a lot online, or just advice in general, is like focus on one thing. Obviously, you focused on 86 things and it ended up being a $1.27 billion exit. Why do you think people are fed that lie? And why were you able to run 86 companies and some people are told to just focus on one thing?
Most people, number one, don't know themselves. I'm predisposed to that type of activity, A lot of visionary entrepreneurs need to focus on one thing until it's successful. Then if you have a system or a process, then you can begin to expand. And you can, here's a litmus test. It's like if every time you focus on something else, something drops, well, then you don't have the right system and process, right? If every time you focus on something new, the thing behind you that you left, behind you, it flourishes, then you built the right system and process. I disagree with everyone that says you have to focus on one thing. I do think that there has to be 100% focus to be successful, but I can divide my focus up among many. So think of it this way. I always say to my executives, this business, in order to be successful, needs 100 units of focus, right? I'm only going to be able to give 5 units of focus to that business. And my 5 units are going to be focused on the top line, the data. I'm going to help you look at this data properly, know if we're going to make the right decisions. But the next 95 units of focus is all you, and that's actually the governance and the execution in the business. I don't execute in the business. I'm not down the operations. I'm not running the financials. I'm not out selling products. I stay at a very high level, and I'm more like a data analyst at the top. So based on who people are, they can spread themselves like that. If I was, predisposed to, my business partner, he's a crazy visionary. He's a great sales guy, he's always selling something. He just can't help it. You give him more than one thing to focus on, it's going to fall apart. He just can't do that, And so to me, systems and processes allow it. And then within systems and processes, you plug in the right people and you get people to focus on that business. My focus is more on the layer of governance and problem solving, though.
Yeah. I love the quote where we don't rise to the level of our dreams, we fall to the level of our systems, right? You can have these big, huge dreams and they might just be half built if you never create the systems. And so, you can see some of the best partners, just like you said with your business partner, it takes many minds, right? Like when you can have a 2 + 2 = 10, or you have a visionary. I'm sure you're also very, very visionary. You're also very visionary, but having both, it's funny you say that because even my father is the same thing. He's very visionary. And if he didn't have my mother, they ended up building the #1 resort in the Pacific Northwest. Beautiful thing. It takes big vision, and then it takes serious systems and operator, right? We always joke at our house, otherwise it would be a bunch of half-built buildings around, right? So it definitely takes two. And I think that you're a living example of that. We don't rise to the level of our dreams. We fall to the level of our systems. So we really need to set those systems up in place. Eddie, if you're talking to somebody who's dead broke right now, trying to figure it out, they're listening to podcasts, they're just trying to get it going, what's your piece of advice to somebody who's dead broke right now and wants to get into the entrepreneurial game?
Yeah. What I would say is that the world is also telling them a lie. And that is this lie of you just go chase your dreams, find out what you love to do and go do that. No, I always say, do what you're best at until it pays you. Then when it pays you, then take that money and go do what you love. There's a huge difference there, right? When I was younger, I didn't enjoy the jobs that I had, but I hustled, saved my money, invested properly, right? Learned everything. And then today I get to do what I love. I always wanted to own a coffee company. But until I had my $1 billion exit, I didn't buy a coffee company. Once I had the $1 billion exit, I started a coffee company, right? Because I could fail, I could take a chance. And so then I got to do the things I loved. So I would always say to the person that's dead broke, what are you good at? Not what do you love to do, what are you good at? Apply yourself there, because when you apply yourself at what you're good at, you get paid for it. Like if you're good at sales, you get paid for it. If you're good at operations, you get paid for it. People will pay somebody that's good at anything. There's always money to go towards people that are brilliant in any area. So find that area of brilliance and then give yourself to it for 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it takes. Then take the earnings and then go do whatever you want to do. I always believe in delayed gratification. It's not about, aimlessly chasing your dreams and all the things you love. It's about building the right foundation to do the things you love for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love the point on doing what you're good at, because passion will be born. If you say, hey, I'm not passionate about anything, well, just focus in, analyze your life and have enough awareness to say, hey, what am I good at? Because if you keep stacking on what you're good at and you go from good to great and from great to mastering it, passion will come, right? The passion will come behind that, but it's not just going to magically appear. You have to continue to work on what you're good at. And I love that piece of advice. I couldn't agree more. Eddie, what about, you had a huge exit, 86 companies. What did it feel like when you sold that for $1.27 billion? That's something that many people will never experience in their life. What was that like?
Empty. Yeah, it was very
empty.
Yeah. Because as an entrepreneur, what you do is you chase this mountaintop and it's like, okay, next mountaintop, next mountaintop, next mountaintop. Most entrepreneurs lack fulfillment in their life. And to me, the greatest moment of emptiness and struggle was the moment I walked home and was done after my last exit. It took a whole year to exit those 76 companies, 1.2 billion in that year. But I was so empty. I remember laying in bed thinking, what is life even worth living? Like, what am I doing? Like, because money doesn't bring, like, once you get to a place, so that year I'd sold a lot of companies, right? It wasn't like I had one exit and all, like $1 billion came my way, right? I had partners, I had, paid tons in taxes. It was a year worth of just hell of exiting, right? And so, yeah, I was wealthy. But the fact is once you get to $7 to $10 million worth of net worth, your life really doesn't change past that point, unless you're just out living lavishly and doing crazy stuff. I couldn't find the time to take any more vacations. I didn't need another house. I had houses. I love cars, but one more car wasn't going to make me happy. And so you get to this place where it's like 7 to 10 million. It's like all of a sudden another 10 million doesn't do anything, right? And then it's like, then you start thinking like, well, man, like what is my life even worth? So it really wasn't until I found my nonprofit, Impact Others, a few years later, that really started to help me find fulfillment. And what I realized was fulfillment in my life wasn't about making another dollar. It wasn't about building another company or even employing more people. It was about making an impact on someone else that couldn't have, they couldn't get to where they wanted to go in their life unless I was present in it. That's when I actually started to find fulfillment. So one of the most empty moments of my life was after exiting all those companies. Most entrepreneurs, their entire identity is tied into those brands. And mine was, as I would, sit on a stage or talk to people, it was like, man, how did you grow this insurance company from 40 million to 800 million? And that was my story. And that's what I talked about. And all of a sudden that's gone. It's like, and then all they want to do is talk about the exit. And I would say, well, I exited all these companies. It's great, but it's like, but my mind was, where am I headed? And all they wanted to talk about was the past, And so I really struggled for about a 2-year time period.
What got you out of it? What got you out of that struggle?
What got me out of that was realizing that if your North Star is tied to purpose, and instead of using all of your gifts, your talents, your passions to just propel you from a place of, a lot of it is greed, right? It's like, I just want this one more thing, this next thing. And so you're just driven to gain. And what I realized is there's no gain that you can get in this world that's going to give you happiness or fulfillment. I built my first orphanage and feeding center in Honduras and began to start serving other people and began to start doing all these philanthropic things around the world. And all of a sudden, like you're helping some orphan that can't, feed themselves. And I'm finding happiness there, like fulfillment. And then it just kept snowballing. And so now we, orphanages, feeding centers. We do clean water projects. We're in 103 countries. We build sustainable businesses. And now I'm back building businesses again just to give it all away. Well, now it's like I'm in my core genius, doing what I love while serving somebody else. That's what got me out of it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. You said something that I think is really important, because I strongly believe that there is a, whether we call it core genius, inner genius, inside every person that's out there. And whether it's the school system, the environment, something happens along the way where that inner genius, if it's not being celebrated or it's not being paid attention to, it slowly just gets taken out, or you can't hear it as much. What do you think, like, because obviously you are clear and you have awareness of what your inner genius is, your core genius, what do you think happens? Why does that happen? Why do people lose their inner genius? And how can we refine our inner genius if we're feeling a little bit lost right now?
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Our education system, oftentimes the family surrounding, whether it's public school or public university, you're put into this box. And the box I was put into as I came through, a public university was follow one, course until successful, right? Focus. It's go get a corporate job and do it for 20 or 30 years and climb the ladder. And then I got into my corporate jobs, and, all I was told is like, we don't care about your ideas. Execute. If you execute well, we might give you a shot at, bringing your idea back to the table. And so I was always just squashed, right? And I was told that I didn't fit in, that you need to fit in. And so like from high school to college. And the problem with that is, and my parents didn't necessarily do that to me, but my parents had never gone to college. So my parents weren't, they just thought, man, you go to college, like that's it, that's success. My parents were both successful entrepreneurs, and every trait I've learned to be successful in business, I actually learned from them and watching their struggle in building business, not getting an MBA, And so I tell people all the time, I'll teach what I learned in my MBA class in 5 minutes or less. It's not the MBA that got me to success. It was proximity to people doing the work that got me to success. It was enough awareness that, man, I'm not as good as they are. I'm going to watch what they're doing. I'm going to emulate what they're doing. And so I think that for people that are struggling with, what is my core genius? How do I get back to that place where I contribute from a place of like what I was created to do, that inner kind of spark that's inside of all of us? I think number one, it starts with awareness, and it starts with authenticity. I'll tell you what happened was I was told, put on a suit, wear a suit and tie every day, show up, beat everybody else to work, do what you're told. And I wasn't being my authentic self. I was being this like robot of a human. And I found success in it because I was willing to endure the pain and the struggle of it. But when I became my authentic self, which is like, I don't really care what anybody thinks about me. I'm successful enough and I'm going to take my leap. And when I did that, I just started doing life and trying to like do it on my terms. There's something about authenticity that then allows that spark to kind of be revealed. Oftentimes it's hidden in the suits and ties that we're forced to, wear as we go into corporate America, or it's hidden in the systems that people want us to adhere to. And so, for me, it starts with who are you, and what makes you happy. Now, you go back to step number one, do what you're good at first, get paid for it, then do what makes you happy. But you have to start with what does make me happy? What do I feel good at? What am I successful at? Where in my life have I had a win at any time, right? And you got to tap back into that place. And then I think on top of it, you got to ask people that are willing to be honest with you, open questions about who you are. Where do you see me succeeding the most at? Because oftentimes we're so put in a box by society, education systems, whatever, that oftentimes we can't even see our own core genius. So you really need somebody that's willing to be honest with you, that's willing to say the truth to you. Like, you know what? You think you're good at that? You're actually not very good at that. But where I see your greatness is over here. And we all need true authenticity. We need somebody that's just willing to be honest with us in this life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Authenticity and brutal honesty can lead to a lot of really, really good things. Eddie, you talk a lot about time being the foundation of freedom. And you also buy a lot of businesses, so distressed ones specifically. My question for you there is, what do you see a lot of entrepreneurs wasting time on? Something that, if they're in it, they can't see it right now, but time is their most valuable asset, but they're wasting it. Where do you see entrepreneurs wasting their time?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. Most of the businesses that I've contributed towards or I've helped, it is a time problem. Time is your most valuable asset, but yet we spend more time trying to manage our money than we spend managing our time. Most of us, most people, especially in the business world, will look at their bank account every day over and over again. They'll look at their P&Ls, look at their money, they'll count their sales. But they have a luster relationship with their calendar, and they don't manage it with such tenacity and intensity. You have limited amounts. If you walked into your business today and you're like, I only have $10 to spend to be successful, you would micromanage that $10 down to the last penny because you knew that was your only chance of success. But you walk into your business with the same amount of time every day, and we literally just flippantly give it away. And I always say that if you chase time, if you actually focus on time, you get what you ultimately want. If you chase money, it almost always eludes you. And so, with time, I people think I'm crazy, but I toggle every minute of every day, and I have for 11 years. And at the end of my year, I give it to my CFO and I say, tell me the equation of how much my hours are worth. How much is my time worth? And so we track my active income, not my passive income, but my true active income. And every year, at the end of the year, I give my toggle report, which I toggle when I'm working every hour of every day, and I actually have it categorized. Like right now, it's running in the background and it says podcast, right? Like I know how many hours I gave to podcast or to meetings or whatever it is. And my CFO will come back and say, your hour was worth $684 this year, right? And so now I know every hour of every day what my time is worth. So then you get the ability to exchange, for it. It's like, am I really willing to give this time away? Now, I know that seems crazy, but it's like for 11 years, I've increased the time. This will be my first year, and mainly because we've done so much startup, in 11 years where my time per hour will probably go down. And I haven't seen it yet. We'll see it here in the next couple of days, but it's like where my time per hour will go down. That's in 11 years. Well, think about it. If every year you increase the value of your time, right? Like the exchange gave you more money, and you did that for 11 years straight, what would that look like in 11 years, right? And for me, it was massive, right? It went from making $500,000-$600,000 a year to making millions of dollars a year. And I didn't count for the years that I sold the businesses. I'm talking about active income, And so I think last year I was $684 an hour. And so, but I also love to work. Like I don't mind putting in 70, 75, 80 hours a week. Like I enjoy it. And so, and especially if you know that every hour I spend gives me $684, it's like, why not spend, why would I sit here and watch Netflix, man? I mean, I'd rather make some money. So it's like, now I'm in a place in life where I basically give it all away and I enjoy it, but it's like I'm in this pursuit of maximizing my time. And that is the secret to my success. I believe that I get more out of my time than most. And because I do, you can it's like people ask that question all the time. How did you run 86 companies? How did you sell this many businesses? I really focused on my time. Like that's it. That it gave me more. I have more output on my minutes than most other people do. So then you see the outcome of that is exponential growth.
Yeah, I've never heard of somebody going to the minute. So is Toggle like a tracker? Toggle allows you to track?
It's an app on your phone. It's just called Toggle, Toggl, track.
Yeah.
And you literally just track it. And so throughout the day, and even my EA, oftentimes if I forget to classify it, she'll go back in and just classify it.
Yeah, she'll classify it for you based on the calendar. I remember when I think it was either it was last year or the year before, my big reflection, I was just reflecting on the year. And my big reflection, it's funny because you hear all these things and sometimes you just have to go through it. I remember really learning and thinking to myself, the one thing, like there's an abundance of opportunity in this world. There is an abundance of money in this world. But the one thing that we will never get back, ever, will be time. That is the one, like, we're all allotted a period of time here and we will never get it back. And I couldn't agree more with you. It's really funny how we will let what's the most valuable be the least prioritized, right? And we'll let people go in and own that time when really that's the one thing we'll never ever get back. And so it's really cool. I'm going to take that toggle idea and make it happen.
My recommendation is that I don't think people have to do it all year long. I say take a week of your life. I think every entrepreneur should take 1 week, at least a work week, Monday through Friday, and toggle their hours. And toggle them. How much time did I spend in this meeting? How much time did I spend on a sales call? How much time did I spend on social media, right? And you would be surprised at how little time you're spending in productive areas. And then if you want to take the next step, put $1 an hour value on that time. Could I get that job that I did that I spent 6 hours on this week? Could I get somebody for $15 an hour to do that? Right? Well, all of a sudden, when you see that there are things on your list that were worth $100 an hour, $1,000 an hour, $1 million an hour, well, you're happy to then exchange all the things that you're doing that are worth $15 an hour, right? And that's the problem, is we don't let go of those things that have little to no value.
Yeah, it's really well said. Eddie, one of the things you mentioned and one of the key components that you talked about in running 86 companies, it's setting up the systems, yes, it's setting up the team, the right team, but you talked about the reporting component, really that you spend 5 units of time really looking at the reporting side. What's in that reporting? What are you looking at? And for somebody who's now saying, hey, I don't really have analytics or reporting yet, what are the things I should be looking at?
Yeah. There are usually 7 minimum KPIs, key performance indicators, that every business should be measuring.
Yep.
Now, you can add 10 more to that if you want, but I would just say at least 7. That 7 is typically in what we call a acronym we use called SIPOC, SIPOC. It's where do you get your leads from? How do you qualify your leads? And that could be any other variation of that. How many deals are you doing? What's your output of the deal, and what's your customer, right? So these are your 5. What's your customer's experience? Then I add a financial component, profitability, net profit, or I add some financial component. And then I add one more thing on top of there, which is what we call our brick. And so our brick is the KPI that we measure that drives all success in our business. That's something that we go through an entire activity on how to determine. Those are 7 KPIs that I measure. Those all go into what we call a stoplight report, red, yellow, green. If that stoplight report, so I can look at every department and every business right now this week, and every Tuesday we have what's called our win meetings, weekly important numbers, win meetings. In that, I look at my stoplight reports. In my stoplight reports, I know in every area of every business, if it's being measured properly, if they're hitting their success metrics. If it's green, we don't talk about it. It's great job, move on. I don't need to talk about it. At the end of the quarter, we may say, can we up that? Can we go more, right? At the end of a month, we might say, can we add more to that? If it's red, we're talking about it. If it's red for 2 weeks in a row, we're making major changes. And so for me, all I'm doing from an analytics standpoint is think about every KPI in every business and in every department, all coming into one system. I get to look at the ones that are red, and I get to help solve the problems in my business. And as long as they're measuring the right KPIs, from how are we getting business, to how are we fulfilling on business, to what are the customers' experience of that business. And then we do the same thing in every department, marketing, sales, operations, finance. I can look at every one, and typically, right now we have 23 companies, and about 6 hours on a Tuesday, I can look through every point of data that I need and offer the solutions and the changes that need to be made to make sure my companies are still moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why it's called the Empire Operating System, baby.
That's
a definitely an amazing tool. It sounded like you built that. From what I heard you say, you had 30 companies going, and you felt like you had a ceiling, and that's when you decided to build that system. Is that right?
Correct, 100%.
Yeah, so you hit just like any pain point, you hit a ceiling. Okay, I gotta solve this, and off we go. That is a strong system, and it's one of those things. Again, being a younger business, you go through building the system, and now we're in the phase of we've built the systems. That's now being acted on. Now we're working on how do we feed the actions in the system into a reporting system. And so it's great to hear. If you were to, I'll just selfishly ask, so if you were to, I don't know if you have any construction based or real estate development based companies, but if you were to buy a construction business specifically, what reporting items would you want to look at? We touched on all the other ones, but like what brick would you go and set, or what would you think about from a construction side?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of construction, right? Like I've done a lot of development. I've got close to 4,000, real estate doors. So like I'm hardcore real estate. So it depends on if you're on the development side or if you're on the management side or what.
It's called general contracting.
So GC.
Yep.
And you're typically GCing your own projects or someone else's?
Yeah, mix between the two.
Okay. So in my KPIs, what I'm typically measuring is really, as a general contractor, you have two major things that you're measuring, right? You're typically measuring, am I on budget and am I on time, right?
Yep.
Like those are two components. And so once you get into steady state of the project, right, you have to have measurables to determine that. And it has to be determined based on the job, outlay itself. And so for instance, if I'm developing a hotel, what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at the job length itself, and I'm putting those milestones in there. Those milestones are what's feeding into that stoplight report. But the other thing that most people don't measure when they're measuring this is, do I actually have enough resources in order to do this job, right? So your resources are typically financial, materials, and subs, right? So finances, materials, subs. Finances drives your material and subs, but in the end, subs and materials, if you don't have a good handle on the measurables of, do I have enough electricians to actually do this job on time? Do I actually have enough, whatever it is, and so typically what you're doing is you're managing it like a project management kind of process, but you're managing your time, you're managing your resources, right? Your time, and are you on budget? Then you're managing that through your subs and through your materials.
Yep.
Then as you lay that out, right, like you're going to know on a weekly basis if you're in the red or if you're in the green in all those areas. Now, on a big job like a hotel, right, like everything, it obviously changes because like we might be doing our horizontals, right? Like we might be getting parking lots ready and the underground's ready and all that type of stuff. We have an entire stoplight report for that section of the business. When it moves into vertical, where now I'm managing everything from all the various subs and stuff like that, and then now it's all completely laid out. So in that process, like I'd have to actually jump into a specific project to actually tell you exactly what it is, but those are the major core components of construction.
Yeah, no, you hit it spot on. I mean, that's exactly the main goal, is to bring the project on time and on budget. And then the main challenge is always looking at the resources, right? Do we have the resources, trying to solve the problems that are coming in the future today? And so, there's also the black swans you don't know, that you wouldn't expect, right? I remember we built a house. It was right when I was getting my career started. We built a house, and the framing package was like 4 times what you would have paid today. Right. It's like building a house out of gold, right? So, but the other thing is, like, when something like that happens, you can either choose to freak out and focus solely on that challenge, right, or that we also had a positive thing happening, which was interest rates were so low that if you could put product up, it was getting bought up. So the swing was just fine. And I couldn't agree more. That reporting piece is exactly what we're working on on now. And it's really interesting to be able to talk to somebody who's mastered that. And I just got my own little piece of advice there. So appreciate that.
It's funny. I had a black swan. We're developing a big multifamily project down in South Florida, like Cape Coral area. Well, it's been hit by hurricanes a lot recently. And so some of the black swan, number one, like weather related things, like stuff that's out of our control. Number two, our insurance cost, so insurance in South Florida right now with all these massive weather events is crazy. And so, essentially it's a recalibration. When those black swan events hit, you have to recalibrate. You just can't keep measuring the same way. Like you got to go back and reset and do the entire process over again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's great that you love the ground up game just like we do. You have 4,000 doors. What made you decide, like, hey, real estate is going to be part of the portfolio that I want to build?
Yeah, so I'm third generation real estate investor. My grandfather's a real estate investor, dad was a real estate investor. And for me, real estate is is the most stable asset class I can get into. So I look at my life in kind of three buckets. I have what's called my active bucket, and so that's my companies. It produces cash. My passive bucket is where I put my capital to grow and to return with limited effort from myself. And then I have what's called my legacy bucket. So that's my nonprofit. And so basically what happens is everything I generate, whether I'm buying a business, selling a business, or creating revenue in a business, rolls into real estate because it's at least predictable and it provides me the greatest tax advantage. So like if I buy an apartment complex, I'm typically depreciating a large portion of that asset in the first year, and it provides me a lot of tax benefit. But it also is going to appreciate over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and it's going to provide cash flow. So I can typically build systems around an apartment complex where I don't have to be present. I can let it run itself, or pay someone else to run it. And it's just in that passive space, but then I'm kicking that into my legacy bucket. So I just picked real estate as an asset class that, for 100 years we have data on, and it's less volatile than the stock market. It's appreciating and paying me cash flow at the same time. And I like it. It's something I grew up learning. And so for me, it's one of those asset classes that have served me. Andrew Carnegie said 100 years ago, that 90% of millionaires, I think it was like 92% of all millionaires become millionaires by real estate. I don't know that that's the truth today, but I believe that that millionaires passing their wealth on to the next generation is best served by real estate. So, a lot of people are getting wealthy by being TikTok famous today. I don't know, but it's
crypto.
But if they don't put that into some hard asset, it's gonna be really hard to pass on to the next generation.
Yeah. What I love about those three buckets that you explained, and I'm obsessed with real estate, for very much the similar reason. It's because you can create a generational legacy through real estate. You can build a real estate empire over time, and it has so many benefits in building wealth. What other asset do you know that where you can get depreciation? So on your active income, you can get major depreciation that keeps more money in your pocket, right? Legally, you could literally legally pay. That's why everyone was freaking out when Donald Trump paid $717 or whatever it was in tax. Well, that's through legal strategies that were set up, right? And so you have depreciation, you have appreciation, like we talked about, you have amortization, meaning just by holding it, you get paid down, right? And you have the cash flow, like you talked about. It's a phenomenal asset. Plus, it meets one of the human basic needs. There will always be a need for housing. And so to me, I think that learning how to develop, you're a developer, I'm a developer, learning the skill of developing and getting into the roundup game, why wouldn't you want to go and spend the time to learn that? Learn what most wealthy people in the world want, which is real estate. I think it's super advantageous. And so I love that. Eddie, you wrote a book called The Titan Doctrines. In there, you talk about the 8 principles. Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was managing the 86 companies, I wasn't the CEO of those companies. I was overseeing the CEO. So I would hire the CEO. And one thing that I realized is it was my job to get them to break through ceilings. And consistently, I saw the same issue over and over and over again. So I began to take notes on it and be aware of it. What I found was all of them fell into one of 8 categories. So like that book is actually my thesis after managing 86 companies and watching 86 people try to break through their ceilings to scale their business. And so those 8 principles of leadership are what I call the Titan Doctrine. I think that every leader should understand these 8 principles. And, some of those principles are how to deal with fear. Alexander, and I use a historical story in there to kind of drive home the ideal. But, Alexander the Great, he went into battle. He was out front. He fought on behalf of his men, conquered the known world. And he did it because he had the right relationship with fear. And so we break down what is the relationship with fear. I take people like Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the most fascinating people in history, because he had the ability to create the systems. Everything we know today, including the Rockefeller habits, how our Constitution was written, was all based off of what we call the Napoleonic Code. The Napoleonic Code was a baseline for operations that Napoleon governed France, but also his army with, and everything comes from that. It's funny because it is the grandfather of just about every system from Kaizen to Six Sigma. Everything ties back to the Napoleonic Code. And so his ability to create systems so that he can maximize his time, right? One of the other ones that, I'm a huge fan of is I love Winston Churchill.
Yep.
But Winston Churchill mastered communication. One of the most eccentric people on the planet, literally moves a nation, but moves a world based on his words. And so understanding as a leader how to communicate properly, understanding the various means of communication is going to be how you get people from point A to point B, but not just point A to point B, but actually making them better people, moving them from point A to point B. So all of those lessons, I teach 8 of them in the book, and we go deep into the 8 things that I believe every leader has to possess to be great.
Yeah. Have you read the book 33 Strategies of War?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great book. Those same leaders you're talking about just get mentioned so much within those strategies, right? And that one is just, you can reread that book or re-listen to that book over and over and sharpen your mind in strategy and how to think about those things. And that's I'm really glad you wrote that book, to solve those patterns that are emerging. One of the things I've been working on a lot is, how can I, rather than have to go through it myself to learn, how can I start to just learn from others? And I'm really trying to work on that more and more, right? I'm trying to really start to digest that and look at other people to try to learn from that, so I don't have to actually go through it myself. It's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. But, thanks for writing that book. One other thing I want to talk about, because I know we have some limited time here, but, you also created Aspire Tour, which goes all around the nation. Is it worldwide or just nation?
Nationwide right now. We'll probably take it global later this year.
I mean, and they are major events, just crazy cool events. Talk to us a little bit about Aspire, where it was born and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, the Aspire Tour, we've been given the accolade in many magazines and things like that we're the world's largest business tour right now. And mainly just because of the frequency of how often we do it. So every single month we stop in a city and we put 3, 4, 5,000 people in an event, and we put celebrities in there to tell their stories of what did it take to get them to success. And so it's primarily business success. We bring out athletes and we bring out singers and we did bring out famous, actors and stuff like that. But it's primarily business people. And the reason we did that was because my business partner and I decided that 2 years ago, and it's been running for 2 years now, is that we wanted to aggregate the small business space. And, for me, I'm always trying to keep my finger on the pulse of small businesses around the nation, because I either want to buy business, I want to sell business, I want to be involved in businesses. And so we decided that we would try to aggregate them through this business tour. So we built this business tour, thought we'd throw one event in Dallas, Texas 2 years ago. And we sold it out. And we had people like Mark, that first one we had Kevin O'Leary and Alex Rodriguez and various other people. And we've had everybody. We've had Mark Cuban. We've had all the sharks from Shark Tank. We've had Kevin Hart. We've had, Magic Johnson, whatever, Shaq. We've had everybody. And it's been great. But the people that we have back consistently are the ones that are actually authentic with their wins and their losses. Here's what I went through. This is how I overcame it. One of the people that we have back consistently is David Goggins. David, it doesn't have, I would say like national business success, but David has become the voice. Yeah, and that's where it is. It's the mental success. But he's become the voice of those who want to overcome and break through. And he's been powerful, man, and he's been awesome, and he's so authentic and real, and he says things from stage, you're like, I don't know if you can get away with that, but go for it. And I think because of that, we've built such notoriety, and we're just selling out every stop. We've got Charlotte coming up next week, and it's already sold out. We had to turn off all the marketing for it, and then Fort Lauderdale is almost sold out, and Denver's almost sold out, and then we go to Phoenix, and it's just like it hasn't stopped. So we got the entire year planned out. We're headed international before the end of the year, and this is our 3rd year, and it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. I mean, it is a major event, and you're right, David Goggins. When I ran a 100-miler, and I was trying to prepare, and I'm just like looking at trying to find information of how to prepare, and David Goggins, I think his book called Can't Hurt Me pops up, and I just read it. I did every exercise. I had like all these sticky notes on my door about what all my fears were, and it is what's crazy about the the mind, and he really talks about it. He talks about it in his book even, right? People oftentimes, at about 10% of what our true potential or capability is, we have been tricked. Our minds get tricked. We're meant to be comfortable, right? Like we don't want to be uncomfortable. So people are actually operating at like 10% of their true potential. And he shows that obviously through running, through the physical side, right? Ultra marathons are a great way to test that out. But it's really interesting when you think about when you believe you've hit your perceived limit, to know that like straight up, they've done studies, you're probably only at about 10% of what you're actually capable of.
And I love his theory, and I've used it in my own life so much, is that he believes that once you hit that 10%, you can't trick your mind into now going to 90%. What you have to do is you have to do incremental, right? And it's like, can you do 1% more? Can you do one more set, one more rep, one more mile? And so you trick your brain into going past that 10% by pushing yourself just slightly beyond where you currently are capable of. And so I love that methodology. It's like, I heard that, years ago from him. I've used that so much in my life, and I watch him do it with our entrepreneurs almost every month. He's almost on every single stop of our tour. Like, he's been amazing. But it's funny, I have a 10-year-old, and my 10-year-old, I'm making him, move bricks from one area to another in the yard, and you hear him out there screaming who's going to carry the boats and stuff like that. It's good stuff, like that mental toughness, that he teaches is so powerful, and it's so lacking today in the American entrepreneur. We give up too easy, and success is literally one step away. Success is 1% more. And I love that. It's like oftentimes, and this is how we run our business. It's not about doubling what your competition is doing. It's about being 1% better. It's about being 3% better. It's like, can you just beat out the competition by 2 or 3%? Because if you do that on a daily basis, it's like you will get to that level where people look at you and go, I don't know how you're doing this,
Yeah. Tony Robbins, he always talks about, if you can just get a little, like 1 degree better, it might not seem like that much in one day, but if you get 1 degree better, and then you get a little bit better and a little bit better, next thing you know, you have a whole new path, a whole new future. When you push that out, just like you said, 100 days or 365 days, that 1 degree or 1% is a completely different outcome, a completely different roadmap. So I couldn't agree more. Eddie, I know we got to wrap up here. What's next? Like, when you look into the future, what excites you? What's next for Eddie Wilson?
Today, right now, I'm always passionate about whatever I'm doing in the moment. We're rolling up tax firms all across the nation. We've acquired, I think, 4 of them so far, and we're trying to roll them up right now. But for me, everything pours into what I do on the philanthropic side. It's impact others. We feed about 4,500 children a day, feed and educate them around the world. I'm on a quest to do that for 100,000 kids. So in order to do that, I need to take my community to 100,000 people. We're at like 3,000 people right now in the community. And so I want to keep just growing and growing and growing. I want to keep building these businesses to put more, out there. And so that's next. That to me is the legacy of my life that I'm fully vested in now.
I love it. I love it. And, for anybody that wants to just find you, follow you, where's the best way to follow Eddie?
Yeah, and I actually answer all my own DMs and stuff like that. So I don't do all my own posting and commenting, but I do answer all the DMs. So Eddie Wilson Official on all the social media platforms, and I love to connect with people.
Okay, we'll put all that in the show notes. Eddie, thanks so much for making time for us. We loved it. Thanks for coming on, and we're really excited to keep following you and learning from you into the future.
Appreciate you. Good luck.
All right, guys. And with that, guys, we will see you on the next one.